Welcome to the Rye Brook Focus Discussion Program. My name is John Mugno, and I'll be your host for this session. My guest today is Charles Zaba, who is the assessor for the town of Rye and consequently for Rye Brook. Our focus program today will address Mr. Zaba's role in developing property assessments, which probably all homeowners received last week. Welcome, Mr. Zaba.
John, thank you for having me.
Well, let's start off with some basics because I think there are some misconceptions about this process. So let me just ask, just to make sure we're on the same page as our listeners, please confirm that the assessed value of a home is the value against which property taxes are calculated.
Yes, well, there's two parts. The property taxes are calculated using the assessed value and whatever the budget from the taxing authority. So the assessed value times the tax rate will then give you the calculation, which will give you your taxes. So the assessed value does have a big portion into what you're paying in taxes.
Right, but your responsibility is the assessed value, and the municipality's response or the school district's responsibility is the tax rate.
Yes, correct.
Now, before we jump into the process through which individual home values are assessed, could you describe the work of the assessors? How large is the staff and what training have they received?
That's easy. Okay, well, we have two main functions in the assessor's office, valuation and exemptions. So I'll start with the evaluations first. The goal is to maintain a fair and equitable assessment role. That's our major goal. That's the most important thing we have to do. That entails more or less every year doing an annual update in values. Since our community is 100% market value since 2004, we need to update our inventory annually. Our taxable status date is May 1st. So any work, permits, construction, new construction, we have to come up with a value for those properties every year. Outside of that, if you've not done any work, we will then just adjust your value for whatever the sales are showing for that said year. This year, we're looking at a taxable value date of July 1st, 2023, with a taxable status date of May 1st, 2024. So whatever the condition of your property was on May 1st is what we're looking at as a value. Secondly, what we do in the office, we process exemptions. This year, the school district increased the limits on the senior exemption, so we've seen a few more people come in. We also do disability exemptions, veterans exemptions, firefighter exemptions. There's many exemptions our office handles. Deadline for all exemptions is May 1st of every year. Obviously, we collect them at any point when you want to deliver them to us. That's great. But if you want to go onto our website at townofryeny.com, all the applications are on the website. All our inventory is on the website. And usually we have a lot of Q&A spots on there, which you can look up different questions on how to file grievances or exemptions. It will be on the website for you to peruse. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the May 1st deadline is passed. So
yes.
People would not be eligible for such a discount in this July 1st taxing year.
Yes, yes.
You have to apply before next May 1st, May 1st, 2025.
Yes, correct. You are correct on that.
Okay.
Oh, you were asking about the employees. Let me follow up on that. Right now we have 4 full-time employees, not including me. We have a deputy assessor, and we have a few appraiser trainee and a few clerks that work in the office. I'm a certified assessor, so I have to do every 2 years update my certification as an assessor. I also have to update my licensing as an appraiser every 2 years, as does the deputy assessor. He also has to certify for an assessor and for an appraiser. The other employees we do through New York State Association of Assessors. Usually it's every few months there will be online classes. This one we just did, I think about a month ago, was for updating the new rules on exemptions. We've done a few on data collection. So the New York State Association of Assessors passes on a lot of continuing education for us to give to the staff to keep everyone updated on the new laws and new rules in regards to administration of assessments.
Oh, okay. Now, Charles, I understand the town has elected to use the homestead system for determining assessed values. What does this mean, and what are the implications of this choice?
All right, well, they call it the homestead proportions. What it really comes down to is the percentage of residential properties in the community to the percent of commercial properties in the community. So right now, just to give a rough number, right now it's about 78% residential value to 22% commercial value. If the way the homestead and non-homestead works is there's two separate tax rates, the residential tax rate and the commercial tax rate. Commercial tax rate is much higher than the residential tax rate. So if there was no homestead option, there would be only one rate, which would then be a blend of those two rates, which would mean possibly the residential tax rate would increase.
Ah, interesting. So probably a benefit for individual homeowners.
Yes, that it is a benefit for residential homeowners, yes.
Okay. And now this, I understand that the valuations in Rye Brook, or the town of Rye, are supposed to be based on market factors. What market factors do you look to determine property assessments in say, Rye Brook?
Well, how we break up any community, especially Rye Brook, we look at neighborhoods. So location is our primary factor. We break every neighborhood up into the whole village into different neighborhoods. Every neighborhood has its own characteristics, so they all have their own value structure. Obviously, we're going to look at their age, the condition, the style, the square footage. What we try to do is make sure that we get the best data possible. So if anyone feels their inventory might be not incorrect, or you have any issues with the value, usually it comes from our property record card. If our property record card is as correct as possible, your value should be as close to 100% as possible. So we look at every factor. We look at topography, we look at flood zones, we look at everything. Busy streets, up against a highway, all those things come into play when we look at the values.
How those are a lot of factors. How do you, and you're a relatively small staff, so how do you bring them all together? Do you have models? Do you have guidelines? Or
we have a system through the state called RPS. In that system, it actually lets us break down each portion. So the land has its own tables, and the building has its own tables. So that we have models that are built into the system, which will break down each characteristic and put a value towards those. So if you have 3 bathrooms or 2 bathrooms, that goes into the model. If you have 5 acres or you have 1 acre, that goes into the model. So every little detail has its own value. So yes, we get down to the nitty gritty on things. So if you have, let's say your property is 5 acres, but it's only usable a 1/4 acre, that comes into play. So every little detail goes into the values.
ah, okay. And when you look at, so that's how you get kind of to the overall housing market, with some emphasis on individual houses. But how do you bring all that down to the individual house? Is your process basically applying general factors house by house, or?
Well, we do it as a general trend, and we do it as for individual values. If we're going to redo an individual value, we look at all the details. But let's say a neighborhood right now this year, just to let the public know, the average residential value went up 4%. So, I mean, that's just the basic guideline. So if you went up 4% this year, you went up the average. But what we look at individual statistics, and then we also look at trends. So certain neighborhoods might have went up 2%, some neighborhoods might have went up 6%, some went up the average of 4%, but we look at them annually, and we go by usually the statistics from the sales. So each neighborhood has a certain amount of sales, and then we'll come up with an average trend for that neighborhood using MLS statistics and all sorts of other statistics that we generate in-house.
And then just to confirm, I think what you said earlier, if someone had, say, received their planning board's permission to put on a deck or an addition or something like that, that would be in the property records, and you would then take that into account in the
Yes,
value.
that would sometimes knock you outside of the trend. So if we discovered a deck, or you went out and got permit work, or we have a aerial system where we can do flyovers through neighborhoods. If there's things that end up being put onto your records that came from outside sources, MLS listings, or any of those things, you will probably be knocked outside of the 4% trend. So we will individually adjust values for things that come up during the year.
Oh, okay. So aerial systems, you mean drones, for example?
Oh, I think they're planes at this point. We don't have drones, but there's a flyover system that goes over pretty much all of Westchester, which gives us updated photos once a year. So,
Okay, good. So now a person gets their letter telling them what their assessed value is, and they say, oh, that's much too high. What's the appeal process for a homeowner who believes their property has been overvalued?
all right. Well, our tentative assessments came out June 1st. They're on the website, and all the change of assessment notices are on the website. They were also mailed out. Most people, I hope, at this point have already received them. But if you need to go on the website, townofryeny.com, all the change of assessment notices are on there, plus the assessment roll, so you can see any of your neighbors or anyone's values in the town. What I would suggest, if you were going to do it, you come in sometime in the next few weeks. If you have any questions, you can sit with me or the deputy assessor and have a conversation in regards to your value. You'll also have the ability on June 18th, that's grievance day, third Tuesday of the month, between 2 and 4 and 6 and 8 to come to the town hall, third floor. We're going to be doing it in the Chamber of Commerce meeting room. If you want to speak to the board, you're more than welcome, but that is not necessary to file your grievance. You could file your grievance with the town and write a letter to the board and explain your situation, and they'd be happy to review it just as well as they would review it if you showed up in person.
So what percentage of homeowners are likely to appeal each year?
Let's see. On our, well, I can give you last year. Last year we have approximately, let's say, 2,800 homeowners. We had 130 filings. So
5%.
we're talking very small, maybe 4.5%. It's not very large. I think last year total, I think we had 19 reductions in Rye Brook. So, well, actually, if you think about it, if we have 287 homeowners, 2,887 homeowners and 130 filed, that's under 1%. I just looked at the numbers. It's about 0.6% of people actually filed.
Ah, okay. That's a very small number of people.
Yes.
Yeah. And what should they bring to the meeting as documentation?
Well, I would go onto the website, print out your property record card. We have a sales book on the website that gives you all the sales that we looked at to come up with the values. I would go through there. It gives you the styles and the square footages so you can match them up with the properties. And I would come up with 3 or 4 or 5 sales, and I would maybe take some interior photos, anything that you think would help you in the grievance process. Usually what we see is the people who are most successful is if we have the interior condition off. Say someone who has not updated their house in the last 50 years. Usually those are the people that we find out are the ones that usually get the reductions. It's because it's hard for us to know what has been done in a property if we've seen no permits for the last 30 years.
Right. Right. It's interesting because the whole structure is set up in a way to favor reductions, which you have very few of, over you seeing someone with an increase, because probably a lot of people don't report interior improvements, so you wouldn't know about them.
Yep.
And so what maybe we've asked this already, but maybe just to be clarified, what reasons might lead to a reduction? Is it basically showing you've been incorrectly valued because you've been grouped with the wrong other group of homes? You didn't do things they did, or you, as you said, on the interior, you hadn't done anything that was assumed would have been done?
Yeah, well, because what due to not being able to get inside everyone's home, we have to assume average unless we know otherwise. Through MLS or a sale or a permit work, then we'll know the exact value. But like I said before, if we don't know the exact, if your condition is below the average, then obviously there probably is room for a reduction. That's why if you feel that your condition is inferior, you take photos and you give it to the board and they can make a decision, or you could have the town come out and we can do a quick inspection to update the records to make sure that you're properly assessed on that. Also, we look at, usually sometimes we'll have a problem if maybe a property that sells, that the sale price might be a little higher than our assessment. We'll adjust it to the sale price, obviously, if it was listed in an arm's length transaction.
And this is a question about, maybe I should have asked a little earlier. Well, how do outlier sales, sometimes people hit a home run and their house sells for a lot more than the neighbors suspect their house is worth. How do you deal with those types of outliers in the database?
Well, we always trim off the high end and the low end. We always say one sale doesn't prove a market. So we're going to look at all the sales as a whole. If someone's going to be willing to pay 1.5 in a neighborhood of everyone's at 1.1, odds are that property's value will never get to their value because we are looking at the neighborhood as a whole. So there's a lot of reasons why somebody would pay extra or somebody would pay extra. Nowadays, we see people paying so far over list price, but we use all the sales in the analysis and usually trim the high and the low end off. So usually those really don't come into play. So.
Yeah, because you're in a market today, which I'm sure you're aware, where properties coming on the market are low in number because the existing owners typically have a low interest rate mortgage. So there is a certain skewing in the market because there's an imbalance between, kind of an artificial imbalance or a temporary imbalance between supply and demand. So that gets taken into account with your taking off the top outliers, the outliers, and also, of course, people who appear to be undervalued. Honestly.
Yeah, we look at how the interest rates are affecting people. We see an increase in cash buyers right now, which is probably the most we've seen in any of the recent history. But yes, the supply and demand is hurting the amount of sales, but the sales are still very strong. There's some municipalities and values went up much higher, but 4%, it seems like they're kind of going right now in Westchester for increases in values. So it looks like we're kind of level with every other community at this point. Just to give you a little perspective, our values in Mamaroneck in the town went up 4% and Portchester went up 5%. So we're all kind of moving in the same pace right now.
Right. And it sounds like a very small, you said, I think, if I remember the numbers correctly, something like 140 people made an appeal and 38 were successful.
It was 138 people filed and 19 reductions.
Okay. So 15% of the filings were successful.
Correct.
Okay. Well, this has been informative. And the appeals process, I think, has started already. And the meeting is, did you say June 25th?
June 18th.
June 18th.
June 18th, yes. We're collecting applications right now in the assessor's office. You could give us a call. Give us a call. We could give you email addresses. Everything's on the website. Our email address is on the website. You could, stopping in is the easiest because we could always have a conversation with you. And sometimes we can figure this out before you even get to the grievance process. We're happy to look at the values. If there's something we could do, we'd be happy to do it. But yes, the deadline to file is June 18th. Obviously, the meeting is going to be from 2 to 4 and 6 to 8. If you want to call ahead of time and schedule a time for to meet with them, we'd be happy to do that as well. But yeah, that's about it. All the information you're going to need is on the website. All the sales you need to prove your value will be on the website. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us and we'll be able to answer your questions.
Oh, great. Let me say this. Is there any topic you think would be about this process that you think would be of interest to our listeners that we've failed to discuss so far?
I think we hit all the high notes on this. I think the most important part is make sure if you feel your value is overassessed, don't question it. Come in and talk to us. We're happy to have a conversation. if you feel, I mean, some people feel discouraged sometimes that the process is too daunting. Don't feel that way. Come on in. We'll have the conversation. If after that you feel like you don't need a file, then so be it. But we'd like you to come in and have a conversation. And if we have to brush you up on the process a little bit more, we'd be happy to do that.
All right. I actually, a couple of years ago, attended one of these sessions. And what was interesting was listening to people who wanted to file a grievance based on economic concerns. They felt they couldn't afford the tax increase. But now maybe I'm just connecting the dots incorrectly, but it sounds like those people should really look to see if they qualify for any of the exemptions that get decided sometime before May 1st. Did I get
Yes.
that right?
Yes, you hit that on the nose. Yes. If you have any questions about exemptions and if you're eligible, disability, veterans, anything, you reach out to the office, obviously before May 1st, because all applications and all supporting documentation needs to be in before May 1st. But if you have a question after you see this video, please call the office, go on the website. All the applications are on there, and we have a question and answer on all of them. So if you have any questions, they'll be on there, or if you have any more questions, you can reach out to the office.
Okay. Well, this has been very informative, Charles. Thank you very much for discussing it with us today.
Thank you.